But even I've been absolutely staggered by the uselessness of this government, because not only do they appear to have got into power by telling a whole raft of lies, which they're still telling, but they're actually incapable of running anything.
I agree. It's not just the bad policy for me and bad decisions. It's actually the hypocrisy.
Yeah.
The promises that were made during the election campaign, all the things that Starmer said that he would do, wouldn't do. Complete U-turns on everything. And it shows that this government is all about student politics. It's about settling the score. It's about chip-on-the-shoulder politics. It's about inflicting their view of the world on the rest of us, namely socialism. I think it's going to be a very, very miserable time indeed under Labour government.
Absolutely, because, you know, let's face it, the farmers that they've taken on are revolting. This is just the beginning. Nigel Farage said this yesterday, and it is just the beginning, because the farmers are not going to give up. There's no reason to tax them in the way that they want to tax them. It's not going to get them much money at all. The same goes for pensioners. We've got a story this morning, 100,000 pensioners have now fallen into fuel poverty. The first snows fell on Britain yesterday. It's freezing cold. There'll be a lot of pensioners this morning waking up at 7:26 thinking, shall I even get out of bed because I can't really afford to put the heating on?
Agreed. You can't have good public services unless you create wealth. And in my view, the biggest harm of this government could well be to the economy in terms of tax, in terms of individual wealth, in terms of ability to pay bills, in terms of unemployment and job market. It's very worrying indeed. And I think before too long, people will want the Tories back.
I think people will certainly want a change. I mean, when they said they wanted change, they didn't expect this kind of change, because this is kind of ruinous change, it seems to me, because they keep talking about doing things for the good of the country, creating growth. Well, growth is down to 0.1% in the first 3 months to September. It's likely to fall into recession, I suspect, in the next 6 months. Job losses are going to go higher and higher and higher. Even the Bank of England, who are not exactly against Labour, have come out and said they agree now with the big companies of this country who say the national insurance hike is unnecessary and ridiculous, and it's going to cost jobs, and it's going to cost all sorts of big rises in unemployment, and prices are going to go up as well. So the economy that they inherited was actually not bad. They're ruining.
Agreed. It was one of the fastest growing economies in the G7. Inflation was falling, jobs were increasing, unemployment was down. We were turning a corner after the COVID situation, and we were on the right track. But of course, you cannot improve the economy and grow the economy with measures that harm the economy. And that's where Rachel Reeves is right now with her dodgy CV and her plagiarism. So I suspect that there is worse to come, and I'm worried about the future. But we need to hold the government to account. This is what a good opposition must do. And my colleagues in Westminster, I know, will do that.
And interestingly as well, it's a dangerous time for the world, because we've got Joe Biden just earlier today agreeing to give Ukraine anti-personnel landmines. This comes on top of him agreeing to sanction them using long-range missiles against Russia, which they did yesterday. I understand that the breaking news this morning is that the American embassy in Kyiv has been shut down as a precaution, because they believe there's a specific threat made to it from a possible airstrike from Russia. Let's start with the landmines. I thought landmines were outlawed. I didn't know you could actually... I didn't think you could sell them. I didn't think you could buy them. Didn't think you could use them.
Yeah, I think that's a strange decision, actually. I think landmines are politically very unpopular. There's clearly a tactical reason why they've been offered, but I'm not convinced that's an act of war in itself. So let's see how that evolves. In terms of the missile systems, Mike, this is really significant, because ultimately, Ukraine is now in possession of a weapon that can hit any target with impunity within 190 miles of the weapon system, which means that installations, it means logistic depots, fuel depots, ammunition depots, it means that command and control centres, it means that bridges and supply lines are now easily in range the Ukrainian forces, and I think they have the effect of deliberately targeting and significantly degrading Russian capability.
Yeah, but what about the retaliation aspect of that? Because if we see the Russians threatening all sorts of things, I know they've done it before, and many people believe that lots of the threats are a bit empty, but maybe they won't be empty always and forever.
Well, I think there is a fear of escalation. I think the measures announced yesterday, the first use of the Army tactical missile system, is an escalation. I think we're going to be careful with that. Russians are aggrieved at that. They've lowered the threshold for the use of first-strike nuclear weapons, which again is very significant. So we've got to be careful here that we don't escalate the conflict beyond current borders. And of course, the UK and France have given Storm Shadow to the Ukrainians as well, which is a very potent £2 million weapon, which has a range of 340 miles. Now, you work it out, Moscow is 310 miles from the Ukrainian border. Everything's in range. Everything is now in the sights. And we've got to be quite careful, I think, that we allow Ukraine to prosecute its war aims to eject Russian forces from Ukrainian soil without necessarily escalating the war.
Yeah, and that is the problem, though, because Keir Starmer was just at the G20 in Brazil. He wasn't able to get very far with what he wanted, which was to try and get an utter condemnation of what Moscow was doing. He didn't get it because China were there, because India were there, and because Brazil were there, and all three of them are part of that BRICS sort of, you know, coalition of countries around the world who are not particularly in favour of the West. And then similarly, he was questioned, and we're going to show you this, on the arrests in Hong Kong, and he was very weak on it. Let's have a look.
Well, we want that close economic partnership, and China is the second biggest economy in the world, and therefore I see that as an area where we can cooperate. But I do also think it's right that where we have differences, we have a frank discussion about them, as we did yesterday in relation to Hong Kong. So I do think both of those things need to happen, but what we mustn't lose is the opportunity for our economy with a better partnership when it comes to cooperating on economic and trade affairs. But as I say, that doesn't mean we don't have our differences.
I mean, you know, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith was on the show yesterday saying absolutely a massive mistake to try and cosy up to China. They don't care about Britain. They're not interested in our views on their human rights record or who they arrest and imprison in Hong Kong. They couldn't give us stuff, and they will only take advantage.
Yeah, I mean, China's an interesting one because you can't ignore them. They're too powerful, they're too big on the world stage. We are trading with China. A lot of our imports come from China, so we can't ignore them completely. We have to work with them, be a critical friend, if you like. And Ian,
yeah, but we're not a critical friend because we're not a friend. They don't regard us as that, and they don't care.
Well, that's part of the problem at the moment. Starmer is very isolated on the world stage. He's upset the Americans with the decision to put activists into US to help the Democrats. Appalling decision. We've given away the Chagos Islands. We've isolated Israel. The list goes on. I mean, Starmer at the moment is floundering on the world stage. He's jetting around, completely contradicting his net zero approach when he was the opposition leader. We're in a mess at the moment. And what we have to do is reaffirm those alliances that we've got. We've got to rebuild the friendship with NATO, rebuild the friendship with the US, which is very special and must be special. And it's about doing what we have to do internationally on the world stage to work with, alongside everyone.
Yeah, I think he might spend a bit more time at home as well. It might do him a bit of good to get back to reality. James Sunderland, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, retired Army Colonel and former MP.